Hi, so I'm Shane. Today I'm going to be talking about the Accounting Ethics Project. This is for Kenneth D. Schifrin, a CPA. And this project is, just as a disclaimer, this is for educational purposes. This is the part I want to focus on here. There may be assumptions in this presentation that aren't necessarily true. Just so you know, just so that's in there. The purpose of this project is just to look at why CPA did what they did, and got their license revoked. So there's a little speculation on the part of why they did what they did. Moving on, the topic selected is for Kenneth D. Schifrin, which is a CPA. He's born in 1957, and at the age of this incident, it was 2020. So he was 62 at the time of this incident, meaning he's about 67 and 68 now. He lives in New Jersey. He was a CPA in New York since 1984, so he's been a CPA for some time before the incident happened in 2020. Okay, so some background about Kenneth Schifrin. First, about his education. He went to Stony Brook University, which was in New York, as well as Adelphi University. He got his MBA in accounting and finance there. This was also in New York. So for his career progression, you can see there's a lot going on here. To me, something that catches my eye is that it shows that his first job out of college was CFO. After he had 10 years as a CFO at this job, 10 years for 10 years just out of college. But if we look into his LinkedIn profile, we can see his education down here. This was for his MBA, which ended 1982. And then there was a decent years of gap. If we come down here, it shows 1989. So there was 7 year gap in between there. He may have been working somewhere, maybe didn't think it fit his profile anymore. So it's just not included on his LinkedIn. But that was one thing that kind of caught my attention. There's some other things here. You can see there's some gaps in between. So he ended this job in 1999. It's about a year or two gap until he got his next job. You can see this job ended 2003. By the way, so CFO down here. Then he was director of finance. Then he was vice president of finance, controller, CFO, self-employed for ESEX Financial Services, and then founded ESEX Financial Services. So he likes to stay within this kind of technology, information, and finance. That's kind of his specialty, you could say. And then he was CFO here at Liquid Holdings Group. And this was 2012 to 2014. And this is the one we want to focus on the most. This is where the incident happened. So this is the area we will be focusing on more. But it is important to look at his history, see kind of how he got there. So he was in a position of power in these companies, and he's not foreign to this idea, basically, of being CFO and in power and signing off on financials. Okay, so that's a little bit about his career. Oh, one other thing I'd like to mention. On his profile, he does mention right here startups and turnarounds. So it looks like he doesn't really like to work with well-developed companies. He likes to kind of be, a man in charge, such as CFO, at these startups or turnarounds where stuff isn't really going right yet. He likes to, seems like he likes to kind of get them into that place where they are at a good spot. Okay. So now we'll talk about the incident that happened. And this was with Liquid Holdings Group, which was the last place he worked at right here, according to his LinkedIn, where he was CFO. Okay, so what exactly happened? Basically, you can kind of read through this if you want a little bit. I'll be summarizing it. Basically, for Liquid Holding Group, they had misleading financial statements. And the biggest thing that was misleading about it was their customers. QuantX Management right here. This was another closely related company, related party to them. And this was their biggest customer by far. And I'll show you in just a second when we go to this link. It was more than 90% of their revenue was coming from customers from here. And they did not state that anywhere on the financials. In fact, it says they accounted for a small percentage of its customers according to their financials, which is a blatant lie. So during the relevant period, however, yeah, consisted almost entirely of customers that are referred to Liquid by QuantX. And then Trifrin, which is the man in question here, Kenneth Schifrin. He reviewed and signed these SEC filing described above, so these financial statements, and that is why he is at fault for, you know, the misleading financials. Okay, so if we come over here from third quarter of 2023 through at least the second quarter of 2024, Liquid did not successfully and independently recruit more than 2 customers. During the relevant period, virtually all of Liquid's new customers were QuantX traders related. So this is where that misleading financials comes into play. And if we see this note here, we can see third quarter of 2013, 27 of 27 customers came from QuantX. Fourth quarter, 48 of 48 came from QuantX. 2024 first quarter, 74 of 76. Second quarter, 95 of 97. So essentially, they had no real customers other than the ones coming from QuantX, yet they did not seem to find it was reasonable to put that in the financials. Okay, so what laws were violated in this case? So firstly, Schifrin was at cause for what happened because he was a CFO. He signed off on these financials. His name is on it. He is liable. He's responsible for what happened. So what exactly are the laws that they broke? So there's a section 13A-1 and 13A-13. And in these cases, 13A-1 is basically just saying you need to have annual reportings for your publicly traded company. They need to be complete and accurate. And then 13A-13 is basically the same thing, but for quarterly statements. But what we want to focus on here is what is section 12B-20. So this section specifically, in addition to the information expressed required to be included in a statement or report, there shall be added such further material information. So this is what we're focused on here. Material information such as QuantX being almost all of the revenue coming for the company is all from QuantX. If any, may be necessary to make the required statements in light of them. So yeah, basically you can't have misleading financial statements, and if they are going to be misleading without, notes or something, the financials explaining what's going on, then it needs to be in there. Otherwise, you're going to be at fault here. So this is to protect from having any misleading information in the financials. Okay. So what was the punishment by the SSE? So basically, this note up here is basically just saying that Schifrin should stop committing violations to this cause. So this is basically saying that he agrees to not do that anymore. This note down here basically saying that he needs to pay $25,000 to the SEC. Over a certain period of time, he'll have to pay it, and so on and so forth. Interest and penalties if he chooses not to pay it or something in time. So basically, the biggest punishment he had was paying $25,000 for this misleading financial statement. And down here was a punishment by New York. So New York, well, I saw no enforcement actions were found. I saw that he was no longer registered as a CPA in 2015, which we can click here. It's right here, date of register 1984, which was when he started. Status, he's no longer registered. He was registered through 2015, which was, this was kind of the end of Liquid Holdings. Enforcement actions, we see no enforcement actions were found in the past. Okay, so coming back here, and one thing I find interesting here, this case didn't happen. If we go into the SEC case, this case didn't happen until 2020. But kind of the end of Liquid Holdings which was around 2015. This is kind of when his CPA license was no longer registered. So it seemed like this wasn't necessarily revoked. His license wasn't revoked. It seems to me more like it was voluntary. He just choose not to renew his license after this happened. Maybe because he knew what he did was wrong and so on and so forth, whatever. But for whatever reason, he did not renew his CPA after, even though this case didn't happen until 2020. Okay. So after the incident, um, so I kind of tried to look at his LinkedIn and I looked around at other places. I didn't find a conclusive answer, whether he's working, whether he's retirement, whether he's not working, whatever. But based on kind of what happened, seeing his job titles, CFO, vice president, founder, all this stuff in his past, it seems to me he's probably well off. He has a background in finance and kind of understands it. He might be a savvy investor. So maybe after this incident, you know, what I like to believe is he maybe does something on the side a little bit, but he's not necessarily employed by, another firm or anything like that, because of what happened and, his misleading statements, whatever. But it seems to me that's what happened. He's not really working. He's probably in retirement, and he probably has enough in his retirement due to his finance background and what I assume are these high paying jobs over here. He's probably made it for retirement, is what I had to guess. Okay, so my personal thoughts about the case. I think it's kind of interesting, like I noted, how down here he chose to not renew his license or anything after the incident, even though it wasn't the the incident wasn't done until 2020. So like the years here don't match up. This was the end of Liquid Holdings, and it seemed like maybe he was already done. He wanted to retire, whatever. So my question is, maybe if he was younger, if he had more of his career left, he wasn't set for retirement. Maybe he wouldn't have done what he did and signed misleading financials. The risk at this point in his life is just kind of that fine and no longer being able to be a CPA or such. But mainly the biggest risk to him, if he doesn't want to work anymore, is really that fine, which was the 25K. So I wonder if maybe he was younger, he wasn't at the end of his career, he didn't have a retirement bill. Would he still have done what he did and signed these misleading financials? This is all speculation, of course. Come back to this disclaimer. This disclaimer includes, assumptions. This isn't necessarily true. I don't know. Post incident, he may be working somewhere and it's just not online. But these are just my personal thoughts. So that concludes the presentation, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.